Since we began streaming our services on the internet, I've had a number of requests to show some pictures again of our two miniature donkeys and Tinkerbell and Nessie. So here they are. And it got me thinking about the place of donkeys in the Bible. Now, on Palm Sunday, of course, we were reminded of Jesus riding into Jerusalem on a donkey. But you know, there are many other references to donkeys in the Bible, including a remarkable speaking donkey, but more about her in a moment. Donkeys were associated with peace and industry. They were, of course, the basic means of transport for the working man. However, horses spoke of wealth and prestige. They were symbols of power and military might. So perhaps that's why God told his people to avoid having a king who would choose horses to ride on and rely on them, because donkeys were far better adapted to the kind of life that God wanted his people to live. Nevertheless, when Solomon became king, after David of course, he totally disregarded God's instructions and he amassed thousands of horses. In fact, he built up a lucrative industry in trading horses between Cilicia and Egypt. Now in Genesis chapter 22, we read of Abraham getting up early in the morning in order to saddle his donkey. And then in chapter 32 of Jacob sending 20 female donkeys to, or jennies we might speak of them today, as part of an expensive peace offering to his brother Esau. Moses put his wife on a donkey and his children too when they were crossing the desert. And Abigail prepared a whole caravan of donkeys to take supplies to King David. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, there is a remarkable speaking donkey who appears in the book of Numbers. Indeed, apart from the serpent in the Garden of Eden, I think she seems to be the only animal ever to be given the gift of speech. And she belonged to a man called Balaam, who was really a mercenary, but he was also a prophet. And Balaam was hired by Balak, the king of the Midianites, to go and curse God's people, because really Balak was frightened of God's people. He was frightened of being invaded by them. Now, in spite of being told by God not to go, Balaam set off on his donkey in order to fill Balak's commission. And that made God really angry. He sent an angel to block Balaam's path. When the donkey saw the angel blocking the way and brandishing a sword, she naturally quite veered off the path into a ditch. So Balaam sadly beat his donkey and got her back on the path. But as they were going through a vineyard with a fence on either side, the donkey again saw God's angel blocking the way and veered into the fence, crushing Balaam's foot. So Balaam hit her a second time. God's angel blocked the way yet again, this time a very narrow passage, so there was no getting through either to the right or to the left. Seeing the angel, Balaam's donkey sat down under him. Well, Balaam completely lost it. He lost his temper and he beat the donkey with his stick. Then God gave the donkey speech, and she said to Balaam, "What have I ever done to you that you beat me these 3 times?" I think Balaam's abuse of his donkey is a very good reminder to all of us not to mistreat God's creatures, to look after them. Now, here on the farm, we're accustomed regularly to breaking animals in, and far from beating them like Balaam, we use natural methods. It can, of course, take several weeks to prepare an animal for riding. And yet, the colt on Palm Sunday submitted to Jesus immediately. It allowed him to travel through noisy, crowded streets with palm branches being waved in its face and having to walk over cloaks and branches that had been strewn in its way. And amazingly, it never spooked. And that speaks of the remarkable relationship that God has with all of his creatures. Now, it was truly amazing that the King of all kings should enter Jerusalem on a donkey. In today's terms, it would be a bit like the king or the monarch arriving on a bicycle rather than in a limousine. You see, historically, horses were the thrones of royalty. So in the book of Esther, for example, Haman considered riding the king's horse to be the greatest possible honour. And even today, of course, we'd still expect our queen to turn out with horses on a royal occasion. Now, being astride a donkey was, in Jesus' day, commonplace. Everyone rode them, men, women, children. But, you know, this humility of Jesus is something we should all try to emulate. Indeed, may we all be a bit like the donkey, willing and obedient and patient, waiting for our Master's touch, so that we too can fulfill the task that God has ordained for us in humility and gentleness.